Hey, my name is Athena, and I'm currently a freshman in college. Over my life, I have played a lot of video games, and I feel like I'm a pretty well rounded gamer in that sense. I've been alive for around 165,489 hours as of the time of writing the script for this video, and have had an account on the game hosting website Steam for well over half of my life at this point. Speaking of that, I have around 4,540 hours just on Steam games alone, which is about 2.7% of my entire life. This is not including games that were played on Epic Games or games that have their own launcher like Minecraft. Now, of course, being such an avid gamer, I do have a lot of questions that come to me over my time of playing games. Like, how did certain games' concepts come into reality? How many genres are there left to be created? And the question I'm answering today, how does the types of games that somebody plays affect how they approach the real world? Like, how does this affect this? Now, this question has come to me many times over my years of gaming. I've noticed plenty of times where the skills that I developed through playing the types of games that I do have been applied in everyday life. So my goal now is to figure out how that affects people who play other types of games. I personally spend most of my gaming time playing FPS games like Titanfall 2, puzzle games like Portal, and roguelike games like Enter the Gungeon and Hades. Because of this, I've noticed that I generally have better reaction times, I'm more aware of my surroundings, I generally tend to have a more goal-focused method of solving problems, and I've gotten better at using my surroundings to achieve a certain goal. What piqued my curiosity was how this affects people who play other types of games. What would somebody who plays MMORPGs develop and use in everyday life? Planning? Communication? What about people who play fighting games? Would it just be mechanical skills or getting better at processing information? So this is where I got to work. The first thing to talk about is how learning works in general. Everybody has their own learning style, a process in which helps them understand information the best. Personally, mine is through hands-on interaction and close analysis, being able to make and answer questions on the topic by myself. In the most basic sense, learning is your brain making connections between inputs and outcomes. The more information your brain receives, the better connections it can make, meaning that you can better understand what the outcome will be like in the future. This is why practice works the way it does. By repeatedly putting your brain in a situation where it's getting more information on a topic it already has information on, it allows your brain to make more nuanced connections so you can make quicker and better decisions in the future on that topic. This is how most AI models work as of now. They are fed a large amount of information and are able to link inputs and outcomes by recognizing patterns and learning the desired outcomes. One of the most common methods of training an AI is called reinforcement learning. In this method of training, an AI is given a reward for progressing towards a desired outcome and a punishment for straying away from it. This allows the neural network to create connections between inputs and outputs and better predict which input will lead to the desired outcome. Let me give you an example. Let's say you're training an AI to solve mazes quickly. If you're using reinforcement learning, you would reward it for finishing a maze, give it an extra reward for finishing it faster, and punish it for hitting walls. With these parameters set, you're going to get an AI that progresses towards solving mazes faster. This is generally how learning works with humans as well. In this case, the reward is something such as getting better at a skill or passing a class, but it's still there. Here's another example. Say somebody wants to get really good at chess. This is purely based on mental processing. There's no need for physical training. They start by just kind of making random moves, hoping that something will work. Then they get their first win. They go back and review the game and start recognizing patterns, such as general placement on the board and what to look out for. Then they start winning more and more and start recognizing more patterns, like possibly a back rank mate or different bits of openings. That's how learning works for humans. That's how learning works for AI. It's all in pattern recognition. And the more patterns that you can recognize, the better your brain gets at predicting what the outcome will be. That's why most high-ranking chess players, the difference between them and the regular one is just how much they've played. It's purely based on memory and how the situation has played out in the past versus how they think it's going to play out now. few great references for this type of training are the channels Yosh, AI Warehouse, and B2 Studios. Now it's time to get back to the main idea, what this has to do with gaming. My line of thinking behind starting this project was based on the idea of AI and learning algorithms. If the human brain works like those, then how would different inputs affect the outcome? In this project, I would like for you to think about the different genres of games that are being played as different types of inputs. If the brain is being fed so much of a certain type of information, one can only assume it would use that information to achieve the goals it's working towards, right? If someone practices a lot of puzzle games, then their brain is going to use all of that information and incorporate it into its prediction process of what the best choice to make would be. Now this is where we get into the data. I've divided the general learning styles into my own 4 categories since a large number of people just called themselves visual learners. These categories are visual/hands-on, which I would describe as somebody who goes in with very little knowledge on the topic and formulates questions along the way while interacting with the topic. Trial/error, which I would describe as somebody who goes headfirst into a topic with no idea and just kind of messes around until something works. There is analyzation/reading, which I would define as someone who comes up with questions ahead of time and then tries to answer the questions by interacting with the topic and repeating this process. And lastly, lecture/note-taking, which I would define as somebody who best learns through watching other people interact with the topic and then does their best to memorize or study the information gained by others. All of these could be considered visual learning styles, but pretty much everyone fell into one of these categories. I personally fall into the visual/hands-on category. In general, the way that people learn is at least lightly connected to the types of games that they play. For example, 45.5% of people who answered the survey and played simulation games consider themselves visual/hands-on learners, which tracks with the games that they play, like Sims, Madden, and Minecraft. From my experience, most people go into these games because somebody else recommended it to them. So they go in with very little knowledge and learn more by interacting with the game and asking questions. Another good example of this phenomenon is with engineering majors. 52.9% of people who answered my survey and are majoring in engineering said that their most played genre of game is shooters. 44.4% of them also described their learning style as visual/hands-on. This tracks nicely with the way that people play these games as well. They usually have played other shooters, so they go in with a general understanding of what shooters are like, and get better at it by interacting with the game's mechanics and pushing its boundaries. Here's a comparison of those ratios compared to what the overall ratio of learning styles was. As you can see, there's a strong correlation between some of these learning styles and games that people play. There is a visually distinct difference between interests, learning styles, and games. I'll link the full data sheet in the description of this video. From all of this information, we can conclude that either people with similar learning styles tend to play games that fit their learning styles, or that the games that people play have an influence on their learning style. The way that we can find out which of these is the truth is by looking at more correlations between different data. As we can see by this datasheet, of the people that play shooter games the most, the learning style tends to narrow the more time spent in the game. The players with more hours start trying to learn in very similar ways to each other due to their shared experience and information provided to their brains. This allows us to conclude to a certain degree that the amount of time spent in a certain type of game has a correlation with what a person's learning style is. This may just be that people with certain learning style have more fun playing certain types of games and spend more time playing them, but it's not unreasonable to conclude that the amount of time spent in a game can impact the learning process of an individual. In conclusion, we can't say with 100% certainty that playing a certain type of video game will change the way you approach problems. We can definitely say it with a sense of confidence, though. After all, nothing in this world is 100% certain, so we just gotta work with what we believe in the most. And from my own experience, the experience of others that I've talked to, and the data provided in this video, it is definitely a real possibility that the types of games that someone plays and the amount of time they play them can affect the way that they learn for the rest of their lives.